Kathy, at what age did you decide to be an exceptional person?
I don't think I've ever decided, actually, but
Okay.
it's a bit hard to answer that question.
So, what came first, music or art? Or did they come at the same time?
Actually, art came first. That was something I loved to do, and I remember going on picnics and drawing trees and looking at the light on the water and that sort of thing. So that fascinated me. But I think music was around. Neither of my parents were musicians, but they loved music, and so we had a record player, and my parents bought, Reader's Digest, favourite 100 classics, that kind of thing, and so yeah, music. There was a love of music around.
And was it classical music? Or
Yes.
Music.
Apart from Tijuana brass and a few other things. Yes, yeah. So.
Well, I think Herbert Al is classical. Really.
Yes.
These days, I think he is. And where did you grow up?
In Perth, yeah, in the suburbs, yeah, not far from the city.
And when did music start? When did actual playing a musical instrument start for you?
Well, I started copying my brother when he had piano lessons. He was 3 years older, so I must have been about 5 when I started. I used to play my grandmother's piano, just, fiddle around on it, yes. So yeah.
And at what age did the clarinet follow?
Well, next was recorder.
Okay.
And
the much maligned.
I love recorder.
I love the recorder too.
Yeah, so I think that was, we were talking about that in, I teach pedagogy here at the Con for woodwinds, and we were talking about at what age, we should start our particular instruments. And I think actually recorder's a great thing to set up the coordination of the fingers and just the whole idea of breathing and that type of thing, because a lot of students find the fingering system is just too complicated and too big for them, and the instrument's heavy to hold, clarinet or an oboe or flute.
And then they're trying to learn how to read crotchets and minims.
Exactly. So I think it worked well for me because I didn't start playing clarinet till I was 12.
Yes.
A geriatric start.
Yeah, that's right.
These days. Yeah.
That's right. You should have your diploma exam by then. These days. So, and was the clarinet your obvious choice, or were there other instruments that tempted you?
Mark, when I went to a concert, I must have been about 10, and I heard this wonderful music, and I heard it. I'm pretty sure it was the Mendelssohn Hebrides Overture, and I heard Jack Harrison and Duncan Abercrombie playing in the West Australian Symphony Orchestra and in thirds and going up in harmony, and I just thought that is divine, and it reminded me of Moonlight, and I just fell in love with that sound, the purity of that sound, so I wanted to play that. Yes.
And tell me about your first clarinet.
Well, as it happened, when I was 12, a friend of the family, a little girl who was a bit older than me, fell over in the bath and knocked out her front tooth, and told her parents that it felt funny to play with the clarinet, and so I got her clarinet, a little plastic Boozy and Hawkes. Regent, yes. I think Mum and Dad bought it for $40, so... Yeah.
I think that was a good price.
Yes. But I love the purple velour inside.
Yes, I think the velvet case has always got everyone, doesn't it? So Kathy, was the clarinet an easy progression for you? I mean, was it sort of love at first squeak, or?
Yeah, it just kind of felt pretty natural, though I was a bit dizzy to begin with, and I had the most wonderful teacher, Duncan Abercrombie, for my first lessons, first couple of years, so he was terrific. Through high school.
And how soon before you started playing in an orchestra?
Well, when I was about, I think I was 15 when I got my first professional gig in what was then called the WA Arts Orchestra for opera and ballet. So I think my last year at school I was 16, and I was playing for we did Madame Butterfly, or I can't remember. Yeah, I think it was Madame Butterfly, and some ballets as well for the WA Ballet. So yeah, that was fun to be in among professional players, and just doing
Maybe
this.
harder these days to get those sort of opportunities so early on.
Yes, I'd say so. Yes, much harder.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tertiary study.
So I hopped off to Canberra. I'd only just turned 17, and I went and studied at the Canberra School of Music with Don Westlake.
Right.
And I also did. They put me into second year of the degree, which was a 4-year degree, so I was there for 3 years, and then I did an extra year as they'd brought in a postgraduate diploma of music performance. So.
And from Canberra.
From Canberra, yeah.
Yes, but from Canberra, where did you?
Oh, from Canberra.
Yeah, from
yes. I was very fortunate to have a Churchill Fellowship, and I also got invited for the first 6 months of, I think it was 1984, to play in the Tasmanian Symphony as second clarinetist, and then I went on the Australian Youth Orchestra tour, a 6-week tour of Europe, and ended up in London, where I took up my Churchill Fellowship for 15 months and visited various teachers in Europe and the UK, and then went on to America and came home.
So tell me about some of those lessons. Was it a sort of an eye-opener to suddenly be in Europe having lessons from these great names, presumably?
Well, it was fabulous. I'd been lucky enough to meet some of them through masterclasses in Australia at the School of Music in Canberra. For instance, Hans Steinzer, who was the most lovely man and a kind of real Zen thinker and a wonderful listener as a teacher. He heard everything. He would gently question me, why are you putting in a Gogic accent there? What's the purpose of that? And he'd bring my attention to things never in a sarcastic way, always in a really supportive way. So Hans for me was just like an amazing teacher, and also learned from. I had a lot of different lessons with lots of people. Jack McCaw in the Philharmonia.
Who of course was a New Zealander.
Yes. So.
And another gentleman.
Oh, beautiful! And I remember his Rachmaninoff, the second piano concerto, the beautiful solo in that. I got the £5 tickets and sat at the back of the hall there, and yeah, it was a great experience. I went to so many concerts and heard such great playing, and had
his
lessons.
playing was in some ways a little bit out of step with many of the other English players at the time, wasn't he?
True. But I really admired his Nielsen concerto
Yes.
recording. That to me still stands up. It's incredible.
Exceptional.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in America, where did you study?
Yeah, I should probably just go on. So yeah, I had lessons with Anthony Pay in London as well, and a couple of lessons with Jack Brymer, and one lesson with Michael Collins and Andrew Mariner. They were just slightly older than me, but
Yes.
that was great to, just meet them and hear them play, and it was fabulous. So then I went on to Hans Steinzer in Hanover, and I was there for about 8 months, and I went for a 2-week period, or 3 weeks, to Guy Deplu in Guy Deplus, yes, in Paris, and then he said, there's this wonderful summer school that's happening down in Annecy in the Southern Alps, and there's a couple of places left. Do you want to put your name down for it? So I did, and it was the most fabulous experience. Played in a group with Yvonne Loriot, Messiaen's wife, tutoring us on the quartet from the End of Time. So many great teachers down there, and such great players from all around the world. It was the most amazing 4 weeks all up I spent in Annecy, which just still really memorable, and it's a special place to me, that place too. And then from there I went on to to New York and had kind of intensive 2-week period lessons every day with Gervais de Paya, who was living there from London. He'd moved there, and that was terrific.
So what did you get from Gervais? I have a vested interest because I studied with Gervais.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what did you get from Gervais? Because
Well,
he was such a unique personality, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was kind of my hero. You know, some of his recordings I thought were so exciting, and I got a lot of support actually from Gervais. He, you know, the feeling like, yes, well, you're on the right track there, and you know, that's very good. A lot of, not a lot of criticism, which was kind of really nice. He'd say, make playing your warm-ups fun. Do your dominant sevenths and add in some bluesy, jazzy stuff into it, and just make it like a game. And it's finite. You know, there's only 12 tones, 12 semitones, and you know, you can do a lot with that, and you know, you can find all the patterns within that. So technical work was always a bit of I don't know, I just felt kind of ill when I thought about it, but Gervais kind of helped me to see that it could be fun and find a way through that. I also played the Nielsen Concerto for him a lot there, and so went through that quite a lot. And
yes, I associate the word flair with Gervais.
Totally.
Just, I mean, there were other clarinet players around who perhaps played with more accuracy and so on, but he had flair which connected with the audience.
Yes. And a real love and passion for the music. I think that really came across to me. But yeah, he always had this kind of maroon smoking jacket on when I went for lessons, and it was really lovely to experience time with him. And then I went on to Elsa Vedder for about 3 months in East Lansing in Michigan, and Elsa was terrific. She really made me feel part of the clarinet community there too. I wasn't officially studying at Michigan State, but just with her privately, and so I met a lot of the other students, and it was a really nice group. I'm still in touch with one or two of those students today.
And Australia called you back?
Yeah, well, I got back, and the day after I got back, there was Jack Harrison, who I had my last year at school. I learned from Jack, wonderful player and a lovely human being. Jack told me there was a job in the Queensland Theatre Orchestra, which then became Queensland Philharmonic. So I flew over and did an audition, and 6 weeks later I was playing as first clarinet in QTO with Georg Tintner as the chief conductor of mainly opera and ballet.
And how long were you with that orchestra for?
For 4 years, yeah.
And any particular highlights from that time?
Actually, because it was a small orchestra, there was quite a lot of emphasis on chamber music. So I remember playing the Grand Partita Mozart with Eve Newsome, Michael Dixon, and Judy Wood on bassoon, and it was a really lovely performance. And La Bohème, especially La Traviata, really some of the ballets too. Really lovely times. Mozart Concerto and the Nielsen Concerto I played with that orchestra.
So from QTO, what was next for Kathy?
Well, I wanted to go. My mum had cancer, and I sort of felt a real pull to go back to Perth, and a job came up there. When I was 16, I went to National Music Camp, and Richard Gill was our conductor, and Richard Gill had just arrived in Perth a few years before and was dean at the Academy of Performing Arts, and there was a job going there which was half-time performing chamber music in a wind quintet, which would also have concerts with string quartet and other players, great pianists that were there. And so I was offered the job there, after auditioning and doing some teaching there, and so I went. My husband, by that stage, I got married to Chris Lockhart Smith, my husband, and he's a cellist, and he was in QTO as well, and so we both took off for a bit of an adventure to Perth, and we were there for 3 years, and
so
it was a lovely
the first major amount of teaching you'd done, or had you
Yes.
been teaching all the time?
Yes, although at the School of Music, when I was still very young at that point, but Don Westlake had kindly offered for me to be the assistant clarinet teacher there, so I was teaching a bit through the School of Music and at various schools along the way, and I'd been teaching at schools in Brisbane. But yeah, it was the first big teaching kind of job that I'd done at tertiary level. Yeah.
I was fortunate to go to the same institution after you to teach, and I had some of your students, and they just absolutely adored you.
Oh, that's nice. Well, I adored them too.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So, Perth, and then
to Melbourne actually. I was asked to audition and be interviewed for the Victorian College of the Arts. There was a woodwind position there, lecturing woodwind. So, and again, on staff there were some brilliant players and who said they wanted to play chamber music, Michael Kieran-Harvey and so on. And yeah, it was great sort of environment to do chamber music. So I went there and I was there for 3 years. Yeah.
You really covered Australia.
Yeah.
Yes.
And while I was there, I got asked to, at the last minute, to fill in for a Beethoven septet performance up in Mudgee at the Huntington Festival with Richard Tognetti and ACO, but it was just a chamber music concert, and from around then I started getting asked to play principal in ACO, which was a very long relationship that went for 2 decades. Yeah.
Right.
So it was fantastic, and one of the reasons I moved to Sydney, as well as being getting the position of a core member of the Australia Ensemble at the University of New South Wales. So I came up from Melbourne and decided to move to Sydney for those 2 reasons.
And then you started some teaching at the City Conservatorium.
Yeah, just little bits. I remember in the early days some lovely students.
Yes,
Katie Hanna.
Yes.
Yeah.
And many of them have gone on to do really great things.
Yeah. They have. Yeah, I'm so proud of my students.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And they talk about their lessons with you with such adoration, which is great.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
that's so
of course they do,
nice.
Katie, of course they do. But then, sadly, it all changed, didn't it?
Yes.
And I don't know how much you want to talk about that, but unfortunately, you aren't able to play anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I've tried to play a bit, and so I was doing a lot of work, and I also took on a lot of work with the Opera and Ballet Orchestra, and then I got a position with them as Associate Principal Clarinet. So I was doing lots of work, especially while I was on trial there. And yeah, I started noticing I had a tremor in one finger, my index finger, which takes a lot of the work on the clarinet, especially as I'm a person who does half-holing up the top in the upper register and so on. So it's kind of moving in all directions. And this weird tremor started happening, a very slow, sort of big tremor. And I thought, the only answer is more practice. And but it just kept on happening intermittently, not always. And then I felt I probably took on too much work, and I was doing heaps of technical, big things on, things like Salome, having to cover for the principal part and the E-flat clarinet part, as well as doing numerous other things at the time. And Yeah, so my wrist suddenly swelled up one day, and in between matinee and an evening performance, and I sort of barely got through. It was for the ballet, and I did get through, but that was it was really distressing at the time. But I didn't understand that that would be one of my last performances. So yeah, I had both problems, as in tendinitis and dystonia, focal dystonia, which is a little bit more generalised. I've got a bit of, I take some medicine to help the tremors, but yeah, I just basically lost a sense of clarity in my left hand, and yeah, the tremors got worse, and I just couldn't play reliably anymore. So I gave it a rest. My physio was really supportive, Louise O'Brien, and really supportive doctors, neurologists. Yeah, but it kind of meant that I wouldn't ever really get back to the point where I had that clarity in feeling of being able to coordinate properly.
So the strength that you needed to get through this, Kathy, when the clarinet is such a central part of your life, did you, can you talk about that?
Well, it was very hard.
Yes, yes. Because the clarinet was your identity, wasn't it?
It kind of was, even though I sort of used to say to people there's more to life. But, and of course I had my family with Chris and my two beautiful children, who've always been central to my life. So there was my identity as a mother. But of course it's not just, you can never separate these things. They're all interwoven. I was a mother who played clarinet and who, you know, yeah, it's just a large part of my daily thoughts were all about clarinet, because I was making my living that way, and that's how Chris and I lived. Yeah.
Yes. So what was the path from there? What were the steps that you took that helped you realise that there was a new life ahead of you?
Well, okay, I have to acknowledge it was extremely hard at first, and yes. I couldn't. I went to some concerts, especially Australian ensemble concerts, and I was just a mess. I couldn't cope with that. But then I started to do some other things. At first, I found it extremely difficult anyway to just do anything, because I couldn't pick up anything. I couldn't pick up a pot to cook and things like that. So the tendinitis part of it was really shocking and painful too, and it kept me awake at night with burning and so on, and for a long time. And various drugs helped that, but then they would make me very sleepy, so I couldn't drive and stuff like that. But yeah, making a way through. Well, I at first tried to do a master's in audiology, because I'm just so fascinated with how we hear and how we see too, how our senses work. So I found that very fascinating to study for a while, but there were certain things about it that just didn't suit me, and I think I went back to studying way too early because I felt very stressed about having to type, and you know, I did a lot of things through voice control, typing and so on, but to get uni assignments in, etc., at master's level, it was just, I went back too early. So, but then I thought, okay, well, I'm also interested in languages. I thought maybe, you know, if I taught English as a second language, I wouldn't have to use my hands much, and yeah, so I started the training for that, which was a 3-month course through what's it called, CELTA, through Cambridge. It's a Cambridge set-up course, and with centres all over the world. So UTS was running a course, and I did that, and I started teaching at Nantien Institute, the Buddhist Institute, which had a centre in Sydney, and taught there for a couple of years, and then I got a job at UTS teaching mainly foreign students who wanted to get into degree courses. So I found that really kind of fun and interesting, and there were so many similarities about teaching music to teaching English, and it was interesting. Some people said, well, why didn't you just teach clarinet? And I actually found it kind of really hard to teach, and I'd burst into tears if someone was playing Mozart concerto.
Yes,
I know it sounds very I was very weak, but I just wanted to kind of leave it behind for a while and do something else.
So did your students who you were teaching English to know of your background?
No.
So that was probably easier too, wasn't it?
Yeah. And because I was an older teacher, they probably thought I'd been teaching English for decades, so it was an advantage in a way. But that was nice. I met some lovely people, and I tried to make the classes fun, but still stick to what they had to learn to get into their degrees. And it was also quite varied at the Nantian Institute. Different people there wanting to, one was a bit of a celebrity chef, and the other one was wanting to get residency in Australia, and so smaller classes there, but at UTS usually 18 in the class. So
you did that for a couple of years?
Yeah, about 4 years.
But then what was next?
Well, the majority of my students were Chinese, and the numbers just kept dwindling, and at UTS they basically said, look, we just don't have the work for the newer teachers that we've employed. We're just going to give it to the ones who've been here longest. So my work was cut back, and then COVID happened soon after that. But in the meantime, I had started because I've always loved art, I started a diploma course through TAFE, and I loved it. It was just such a great, fun thing to do, and met a lot of nice people there too, at the Nepean Arts and Design Centre in Kingswood. So I did that part-time, and started off with printmaking, a little night class printmaking course, which was run by a wonderful artist called Samara Kendall, and she said, oh, you should do the diploma. So I did, and so I went through that. And then, COVID happened. I think COVID actually gave me a whole new perspective on my career loss, because I saw a lot of friends who were freelancers really suffering during that time, and suddenly, there was this void for them. And so there were other people, not just me, who'd, lost their careers, basically.
And you have a website, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Where there's some absolutely extraordinary artworks.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Well, I'm actually just about to head off in 2 weeks' time to Italy, to the Florence Academy of Arts, where I'm doing my Masters. So I'm really loving the whole thing. It's looking at the old ways of how the old masters used to
how
paint
long will
portraits.
You be there for?
I'll be there 7 weeks altogether in Florence, but we're going to Spain for a little holiday. Chris is coming. I had to either hire a model in Florence from the Florence Academy, or bring my own. So Chris said, oh, I can come. So we're hiring a cello for Chris there, so that I can do a portrait of him playing his cello, and I have to do a still life and some life drawing there for the last segment of their Masters. So, yeah.
So, Kathy, I started the interview with the question, at what age did you decide to be an exceptional person? And you laughed. But I think everyone who watches this video will agree you're a very exceptional person. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you, Mark.